9:06. We're continuing the post-mortem on Galway's exit in the championship, and the draw has been made. Galway aren't in it. I'm delighted to say Gary Sice is with us. Sorry for your troubles, Gary.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you? Yeah, bad Monday morning.
Do you know what happened yet? Have you clarified in your own mind why you're gone?
No, and I watched it back again yesterday evening, trying to figure out where everything went wrong after half time, but couldn't put my finger on one item.
So it was this an entire systems failure? Was it the conglomeration of injuries that you had over the course of the year finally catching up?
A little bit, and I think, to be fair to Mayo as well, the goal came at a great time for them and it brought a lot of momentum. I think they shuffled their deck very well. I saw their lineup at the start and I was quietly confident, because I thought, even bringing on the Matthew Wans and the Killian O'Connors and stuff, I thought hopefully we'd actually be out of sight. And to be fair, I thought we had chances in the first half to be out of sight. But it just felt lovely. Even Killian O'Connor came on when he did and kicked the point he did. It just felt Mayo's momentum was much stronger, and they finished out, bar the scramble at the end. They were reasonably comfortable keeping the ball.
Shane Walsh's performance has to be a bit of a concern, Gary, doesn't it? I mean, last couple of weeks he hasn't been great, but the free take in particular, there was one or two certainly in the first half that you're like, this is huge, especially with the wind. Yeah,
the one at the top of the D in his right foot in particular. It was a real sucker punch for the team. It took a lot of wind out of people's sails, and it took wind out of his sails as well. He just didn't get going at all, and they weren't ones that they're stuff he does in his sleep. I was even surprised that some of them on the left, and Matthew Tierney didn't have a cut at one or two of them, because he's a great kicker of the ball, but it just didn't go for Shane at all yesterday. And for Galway to be at the races and really in the game, they needed Shane to be at full flight, and unfortunately it was a repeat of what happened in Carrick-on-Shannon for him. It just didn't click at all, and in fairness, it took courage on his behalf to keep going after that ball and keep trying to kick those frees. But at some stage yesterday, someone maybe had to say, look, let's give Matthew or Paul Connery a shot at these, but it just didn't happen for him, unfortunately.
Is that just the end of a long season for him, do you think, with Kilmacud as well, that maybe he's tired or mentally drained, or can you put your finger on what that might be about?
It has to be an aspect in it, definitely. I wouldn't give him a pass for it. We've done long seasons. I understand what the long season is, but Shane hasn't done that long season before. That's one thing that stands out for him. Now he got a nice break. He went to Australia and missed a bit of the league and stuff. Was that detrimental to getting him a flow of games and getting him going? Possibly. It's definitely his longest season he's ever done, and I think, to be honest with you, he did look a bit jaded yesterday. But I'm not giving him a pass on it, because he's such a huge athlete. He should have been able to sort that out and to get his performances going. And I think the other thing that's the problem for Shane at the moment, and maybe now after this season it mightn't be, but the level he hit last season was absolutely outrageous. It was way beyond, it was above the clouds. It was mad stuff altogether in the All-Ireland final last year, and maybe we're still pitching him at that. It took him a season to get to that level last year, and we were kind of expecting that every day from him, which is unfair. But that said, yesterday's performance just wasn't anywhere near good enough for a player of his magnitude for Galway.
We did feel like Galway had real strength and depth that would be able to deal with the injury issues that were going to come down the stretch, and particularly in this run of games. But ultimately, they didn't just have enough strength and depth. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. It comes with it. It's two double-edged sword. I think you missed Liam Stade, Kieran Malloy, Dylan McHugh, Damien, Sean Kelly wasn't right yesterday. That's a fair cohort of the All-Ireland team that played in Croke Park last year. It's a fair whack, and as good and all as the bench was, and as many players who played over the league, you're trying to replace some big hitters there. Sean, it was huge courage yesterday what he tried to do. It was clear that he wasn't anywhere near. The one time he got forward, we got Matthew in for a goal, but his energy and his line breaking ability was missing big time yesterday. And as hard and all as Damien tried as well in the first half, he was dangerous to a point, and then when he went off at half time, that big ball inside stopped. And those are big players. I'm not sure anyone could replace them, and it was definitely part of the problem for Galway yesterday.
Yeah, I thought Sean Kelly was in the shout for Player of the Year if Galway were to keep going and reach a final again, for example. And so his injury is so cruel, because his form was cresting to that level again where he was playing as well as he'd ever played.
Absolutely, and he's one of these players that brings on 3 or 4 with him. And I think there was an adjustment for John Daly as well yesterday. John has been doing a role there for us in the last 18 months that's been fantastic, and a key linchpin in the system that was working, and he got changed around yesterday as well and didn't really help. But Sean's running ability with the ball and the areas he goes into and the danger he brings, it's a goal chance every time he breaks the 45 on the opposition's 45, and that was missing yesterday. And like, we can't underestimate how big a problem it was. As I said, the one time he broke the 45 properly yesterday, Matthew Tierney was in 1-on-1 with Colin Reap, and that may have happened a few more times had Sean been right. But these are valid points, but they're not excuses. Mayo did a good job yesterday, and our record against them in Pearse Stadium is not good.
Is there a concern, Gary, that leaders didn't step up for Galway in the second half? I think James Horan made reference to maybe the likes of Killian McDade and Paul Conroy as players who did perform well yesterday. But in that second half especially, would you like to see more leadership from certain elements of the Galway team?
Possibly, but like, you have to flip the coin and look at it in the first half as well. You could say the same of Mayo. They kicked 3 points in a half, and that win couldn't be underestimated yesterday. It was extreme difficult conditions, and it was a difficult game because both teams knew exactly what had to be done. Pearse Stadium has a tendency to do this. It brings teams down to a level where it turns into a pigeon shoot, and it ends up being a 9-10 or 11-10. And I think Galway, the leadership in the first half was very, very strong. Like, they had players coming up kicking points, they had lads taking ownership, they put in big hits, they did big turnovers. Outside of Tommy Conroy, no one really looked like cutting through anyone in the first half, and the second half just didn't come right, and them shots that were floating on, I still thought there was a couple of shots on the second half. I'd love to have seen lads take them on and have a go, but they just didn't, and they were trying to be careful and safe with the ball because it was tense. I think we can't dismiss the fact that both teams were coming in on the back of a loss as well. Eamon Fitzmaurice referenced yesterday that both teams were playing with an edge. It was almost a jitteriness in some of the stuff they were doing for the first half hour, 40 minutes, and I think that fed into the game yesterday. And towards the end, Mayo showed a lot of shakiness towards the end, and I think it definitely took a bit of energy out of Galway's game as well. It wasn't the highest quality game yesterday, and I think Galway probably had a few lads that were trying to be safe, a few lads, the inexperienced guys maybe a little bit more so, and ultimately ended up costing us at the end that someone didn't take a chance and finish off some of the chances that are presented themselves.
So where are we now with the Pádraig Joyce era? Because it has been a wild roller coaster where at the very start there's kind of a surge of energy and belief, and then obviously COVID happens and there's real concerns about whether or not the team is making any progress. They improved the makeup of the backroom team, and they add the steel and the grit and the defensive solidity, and they reach an All-Ireland final, and they give Kerry as good as anybody gave them last year. And then this year it feels like it's a bit of a letdown, but also it feels like the panel is bigger and broader, and if I guess, I don't know, I'm more interested, I suppose, in what you think of where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's the last 2 years have been very positive from that point of view. We've been gathering momentum. They've got to an All-Ireland final, performed extremely well. We're unfortunate, and probably the lack of depth was the ultimate Achilles heel for us last year. Players came back in: Peter Cook, Ian, Keane Hernan, Johnny McGrath. These guys came into the reckoning as well. I think the panel is in good shape. I think Pádraig spoke very well after the game yesterday. I was actually talking to Tommy after the game. I was listening to a clip, and he said that it wasn't as high flying as it was last year. He didn't make any excuses around the injuries or bits and pieces like that, but at the same time you could see him, he was realistic around how the season had been. It wasn't anywhere near as high flying as it was last year. I don't see a need for a change or anything like that or anything daft. I think if he can keep his backroom team intact and keep the panel together, I don't see why they can't keep together and drive on a little bit more. The age profile of that group is quite good, and I think there's probably one or two more hanging around out there as well that can be dragged in and brought on a bit. You need a bit of luck every year, and as far as injuries go, this year Galway did not get that luck at all.
I think as well next year everybody's going to understand the value of having a good early part of the league and then tapering down a little bit and then coming back. And I don't know if this Galway team needs to win any more Connacht titles. Maybe, I don't know. Again, interested in what your view on how important next season's Connacht Championship is going to be versus the group stages of the All-Ireland series.
Yeah, I'm on the fence with the Frenchies at the moment. I don't see a whole lot of value in them if you're looking to win on Ireland. I think if anything, they could be detrimental. Like this year, Galway picked up injuries along the way, getting to finals and stuff, and I don't know if it was a masterstroke on Mayo's behalf getting caught by Roscommon down in Castlebar on the day, but it seems to have fed nicely into them. They've got a clean bill of health more or less with Killian O'Connor coming back in. I do think people are going to be a lot wiser next year. This is their first proper run at this, trying to taper off and build up and taper off and build up. Kerry and Dublin will be interested next weekend to see how they've managed it, but there's definitely a learning there for Galway. All right, I don't think Connacht titles are going to be as big in the framework if you're going to be looking at the All Ireland long term, and it'll have to be something that'll be monitored, as you said there, maybe going fast and hard in the league to try and get a pre-season in, taper off, and then getting ready for the group stages and so on. Like the next 5 weeks, is very, very hard going, and the panel is probably big enough now to do a 5-week stint, but is it big enough to do that from the start of the league to the end of the championship? I'm not so sure. I don't think anyone has that. It was interesting, Max Day was saying it yesterday, they were building a big panel over the league and it was for this period. He didn't mention the Connacht Championship at all, surprisingly, but it'll be interesting to see if that big panel they've built is adequate enough going forward.
They draw for the quarterfinals for anyone who's missed it this morning. Kerry Tyrone, Armagh versus Monaghan, Derry Cork and Mayo Dublin. Gary, based on what you've seen from Mayo, they're back in Croke Park now, albeit against the Dubs next weekend. Can they overturn the Dubs?
I don't see why not. I mean, Hyperbole is going to kick off this morning. The fact that it's Dublin, they've got down there as well. They've got massive confidence from yesterday, and some of their big players turned up yesterday as well. I thought Paddy Durkin was immense yesterday. Aidan O'Shea, to be fair to him, did a good job in what he was doing. McBrien obviously got the standout scorer of the game yesterday. They have issues on their own kick out, and I know the wind was a factor yesterday, but they got pinned quite a bit yesterday. Their return was very, very poor. They're nowhere near where they were 16, 17, 18 maybe. Saying that neither are Dublin, and I think it could be very interesting to see how they set up against Dublin, but I think it won't be much in it. I don't think Dublin would have been delighted to see them come out with the draw either. They're a Croke Park team. They're running style in. The Hessian came on yesterday as well, and he brought a bit of bite to it. They do have danger, but will they be able to score enough is the question. And like 12 points yesterday from Galway and a little bit more from Mayo is not good scoring, and Dublin have the potential to shoot the lights out. So I don't think there's much in it in the end, but they are a danger for Dublin next weekend for sure.
Yeah, the Dublin season so far has been really stop-start as well. Like, great against Kildare in Nottingham Park, but not great against Kildare in Croker, either of the two times they played them in the league. You know, they hammered Derry but barely scored any points in that game because they scored the 4 goals, and I'm not sure Mayo are going to concede 4 goals against them. You'd assume their defensive solidity will be much better. So there is just a little window here for everybody to chisel through and take down Dublin in a way that maybe there hasn't been that sense around the Dubs in previous years.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think the aura that was there previously is there now, and I don't think Mayo will buy into that they're the Dublin of old, even though they have a few of the bigger players back. How many times have them bigger players played together since they've come back? Very little, if anything at all, between injuries and niggles, and they haven't got the quality of game they needed in order to develop Anton either. So I think it'll be a point or two, if that, in between the two of them. They're two very similar styles as well, I think, and the matchups will be key. A Ryan O'Donoghue, who all of a sudden becomes twice as important now in Croke Park. If Killian is back, he's going to take serious marking in Croke Park, and he'll be an awful handful. And then Tommy Conroy looked very close to where he was pre the ACL injury yesterday as well. Some of the cut and runs he made yesterday were frightening, and in Croke Park you'd imagine the 3 of them together, or even 4 or 5 of them forwards together, will be an awful handful for Dublin, because I don't think they're as solid at the back as they were either.
I'm interested to hear your take on the other games in that draw, Gary. I guess Derry, Cork, Armagh, Monaghan, and I suppose the pick of them is Kerry Tyrone. Yeah,
the Kerry Tyrone one, of course, the stagger goes on, and Tyrone's performance at the weekend wouldn't fill you full of joy or anything like that. But again, they won't be fearful of Kerry in their current mood. I know they've knocked up big scores against Louth and Clare, but outside of that, the Cork game wasn't exactly it wasn't brilliant stuff at all. So Tyrone will come with a little bit of confidence towards it, but I do expect that Kerry will have too much for them. I think it's probably a good draw from Jack Connor's point of view. He's going to get a real asset test, and if they come out of it, it could be a launching pad for them for the next couple of weeks.
Who goes all the way, do you think, at this stage?
Oh, that's a very, very difficult question. I suppose based on Galway yesterday, it's an eye-opener around how quick and how fast the injury problem can become a major issue. Like Kerry are in the mix, and I think Dublin as well. They're my 2 out of what's left. That's provided there's no big injuries to the likes of Clifford or Conor Callahan. Like, if either of them 2 were missing out of them groups, all of a sudden you realise that they're very human, and you're not so sure that they could knock the lights out against the Mayo or a Tyrone. But at the moment, as I see it, it's going to be Kerry and Dublin that are going to be between those 2.
All right, Gary, we'll leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks very much, guys.
It's Gary Sice giving us some thoughts on Galway in particular, but the rest of it, as Shane said, Kerry, Tyrone, Armagh, Monaghan, Derry, Cork and Mayo against Dublin.